One thing that stands out here, though, as a lesson of the past 24 hours was this didn't follow slow, I guess, traditional escalation ladder as many had expected. Again, and not only the retaliatory strikes against the Gulf states, but also the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. This was considered to be the geoeconomic nuclear bomb, essentially, and it was already launched on the first day. Um, so, how do you see possible escalations moving forward, or do you think this was just essentially everything coming out at once?
Well, the Iranians have not yet uh, revealed their capabilities. And their ability to destroy tankers and assets on the other side of the Persian Gulf is enormous. They have not really touched those capabilities. These drones that you see being constantly fired into Dubai or the different ports and the U.S. assets, these are old drones, and they're just the tip of the iceberg. So if Iran wants to shut down the Strait of Hormuz completely, it can be done, but it can do something far more devastating, and that is destroy everything. If it destroys everything, and then there is peace, or there is a ceasefire or a halt in hostilities, and the Strait of Hormuz is open, there will be no ships that would go through the Hormuz Strait, and there will be no oil production or gas production uh, to have that ships can take out of the Persian Gulf. So what Iran can do is far greater than what it is doing now. But I think Iran is basically just like during the 12-day war. Iran is managing the war because it wants to see how things are going to play out. We don't know if this war is going to last 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months. We don't know. Some of our mutual friends, as well as others, talk about the problems that the United States will have and the Israeli regime will have in the coming days with regards to um, ammunition, but also the fighter jets, since they have to fly from far away. They have to be refueled, I think, twice, if I'm not mistaken, to bomb Iran. That causes a lot of difficulty. It decreases the number of times they can bomb Iran, but it also, I think, causes a lot of difficulty for the jets themselves. They have to be overhauled. So it's not clear how long the United States can sustain this. And what I believe the Iranians are doing is that they are exhausting them. They are depleting their air defenses. They're using because the old missiles and drones in 5 years' time, and again, I'm not an expert on these things, but they become increasingly less useful. So now is the time to use them. So all these older missiles and drones are emptying out their defense capabilities, and you know how expensive those are. And so Iran is already preparing itself for escalation. So it's hiding, it's keeping its capabilities hidden, intact, spread across the country, using older equipment or weapons, and but striking effectively. So I think we'll have to wait and see how long this takes. But if we look at the previous model, and again, I'm sorry if I'm not being very if my response is not very useful because I don't know the future and I don't know details about what Iran, you know, I don't know they're planning. But if the 12-day war that we saw before is um, is a good model, I think it's fair to say that the Israelis were exhausted after, let's say, 7, 8, 9 days. I don't know when exactly, but things were getting worse. So while I don't know how long the Americans and the Israelis can continue this, but I think that is the model that the Iranians are looking to exhaust them and then pile on the pressure.
Well, What you're describing then is two different war strategies. It looked as if the U.S. was hoping for a quick regime change war to knock out military and political leadership, and then the rest was, I guess, they hoped, if that hope is a strategy, they would crumble along the Syrian model for Iran, I guess. But what you're describing, though, is a war of attrition where the Iranians try to, well, make themselves capable of absorbing the pain which and the attacks coming towards them, and you know, dealing it back, and assuming that the adversary will be exhausted first. Um, just as a last question, I know you can't predict the future, but given how you saw the
Just one
past,
thing that I'd like to add here
yeah,
is that they have a history of miscalculations. And I actually just did a program on Al Mayadeen that was broadcast on Friday, where I showed that this narrative of Iran collapsing, falling apart, that the revolution is despised by the youth, and that a counter revolution or a new revolution is about to take place. This all existed in the late 1980s, the 1990s, and so on. And it just goes on. It's the same thing over and over again. And nothing changes. And I mean, if some of your viewers have time to take a look, it's quite, especially the first half of the program, it's quite fascinating that you could just exchange the phrases and the headlines from back then with what you have now, and no one would notice the difference. It would just be the exact same thing for over 40 years. And so the problem really is that the West has this narrative that it has invested so much into. And of course, they put a lot of money into it, propaganda. They have tens of thousands of Iranians on the payroll in the West. I mean, just in Albania, they have 3 to 4,000 Iranian trolls from the MEK terror organization. So when they have, that many people there, imagine how many people are funded in all these Iranian, anti-Iranian television channels that are beamed into Iran in Persian. They're far more in the West than they're actually in Iran. Television channels and websites and news websites and so on, which are all hostile towards Iran. But the point is that these people who they fund, it becomes a vicious circle. They reinforce that narrative. And so all of these their policies on Iran are based on a false narrative that causes their policymakers uh, to provide flawed policies, and then they hit a brick wall. But since the narrative is so powerful, they don't change. They go back and do the same thing over and over again. So while to me, the notion that somehow Iran will collapse is just something that I think is ridiculous. But for them, even though it didn't collapse in the past, and we had the demise of Imam Khomeini, we had the assassination of a president and a prime minister back then when we had a prime minister in the previous constitution, we had the murder of the head of, we had all sorts of catastrophic events. Just recently, a president he died in a helicopter crash. He passed away, or I don't know if he was martyred. I don't have evidence for that. But the point is that the system is much stronger and more stable. But I think than they think, and I think this stems from Orientalism. They think, oh well, Iran is just this Oriental, of an Oriental despot, and that you take off the head and everything falls apart. Whereas Iranian society is very sophisticated, and the constitution, if anyone reads it, it's a complex state, and we have a complex state structure. So the leader, when he's passes away or when he's martyred, he's replaced. And Ayatollah Khamenei's stature in the eyes of people, as I said before, has grown. He's become a great martyr of the revolution. Someone who many would have preferred him. I mean, overwhelmingly, people would have preferred him not to have stayed at home or at his office, but that was his decision to stay put. Apparently, He said that many people don't have anywhere to go, so I'm not going anywhere either. That was his worldview. So the point is that um, they should have understood this, but they can't because of their narratives and their Orientalism and racism. And I think that that is going to continue to be the case in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, one sees from the literature this common flaws in narratives. For example, after the Bolshevik Revolution, uh, the people who really hated the communists, they're the one who went to the U.S. So when the U.S. suddenly had to learn about this new country which had emerged, the Soviet Union, they go towards the diaspora at home, and of course, who you get information from is the one who hates the government the most, who tries to reassure them that if you just push them, then they will fall over easy, go to get our country back essentially. And but it's also some narratives, of course, which have been made deliberately, so that is, it's always a common, I guess, playbook to that the adversary is all powerful and weak at the same time. So the adversary is evil, is irrational, all powerful, but it's also weak. So if we just push on it, it will fall apart. So it's you kind of see the narratives from be it from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Libya to Syria. It's always the same storyline. That's it's just a population there hating the government, waiting for us to come and free them, and then that the weak government will fall apart and be greeted as liberators. The George Bush line essentially. But yeah,
Glenn, if I was, I mean, if I was to tell American analysts uh, to do one thing, even though if they did this, they still wouldn't learn. But I would tell them to read about Karbala and Ashura and the events there, and how it influences Iranian society and culture and the axis of resistance in general. But they can't see the world in that way. They can only see it from their narrow-minded worldview of exceptionalism and supremacism, and of course the Epstein class as it is, as a class of people above politics and above politicians is another thing altogether. But they are incapable of learning. But if they did learn, they would behave very differently towards Iran. And I think the sort of things that I've been saying over the years, which irritate them, and they get angry when I say it, and they say this is propaganda, it's actually basically reality and the simple facts on the ground. But since they just can't see it, they can't absorb it, they cannot understand the logic, they, from their supremacist perspective, they just dismiss it and call it propaganda. But the reality is that it's been 47 years and they've just waged two wars. And now, and of course, with Saddam Hussein, there are three wars, maximum pressure sanctions, war after war, but it hasn't collapsed. So one would assume that someone would say, wait a minute, let's rethink this whole thing. This is not working as planned. But that's not going to happen until ultimately they hit a brick wall that's bigger than just this conflict. And that is, I think, uh, an economic crisis or some sort of social internal crisis that this war will contribute to, no doubt. But I think the only thing that can change the West is a major uh, historic shift. And that I think will be a form of collapse, whether it's a combination of economic, political, social, military collapse, or more one than the other. I don't know. But I think that is the only thing that's going to bring about change in the West and their mentality towards the rest of the world.
just a very brief last question though. Without, of course, being blessed with a crystal ball to see the future, what do you expect to see today, though?
I think the war will continue to be tough, but we will continue to fight. We are determined. And General Soleimani once said, "We are the nation of Imam Hussein," and that's who we are. So we will see this through. We will defeat the United States and the Israeli regime. They will have to come to terms with a strategic defeat. It will come at a major price, but it is the only way forward. We are not going to accept subjugation. We're not going to accept humiliation. And we cherish our sovereignty. And I don't see any way forward. So this is going to be a battle of wills. But for us, this is both an existential war. For them, it's a war of choice for the sake of the Epstein class, for the sake of Zionists. But in addition to that, Iran has that extra, and the axis of resistance, they have that extra capability, and that is the culture of Ashura that is so much a part of this whole axis of resistance. And as I said, the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei is something that has shifted uh, the situation across the region. And people in Iraq are moved, people in Yemen are moved, people elsewhere are moved. This is going to, if the war expands, if the war continues and expands, this is going to be very detrimental to the West because it gives the resistance more strength and more. Uh, it makes it more potent.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time. And yeah, this is everyone I speaks to about this seem to agree. There's some, some are thinks this, can be put into category as sympathetic to Iran. Others are more hostile to Iran, but everyone seems to agree that this was not a very well thought through war. That is probably a massive mistake, and I think over the next few days that will become evident to all. So thank you again
I
for
have
taking
no
that.
doubt. Yes, I have no doubt that this was a catastrophic mistake for Trump and the whole Zionist project. But they are too drunk to understand what they've done.